mouth is when I'm ocean wave.
Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Coach Mark Martino. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and other than Hubert Davis, Coach Martino is probably the one I get requested the most. When are you going to have Coach Martino on? So Coach, thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. There's a pretty steep bar between Hubert Davis and me. Let's just go there. That's a pretty good step off.
He's a much better player, but you're a heck of a coach too. So let's see if he can keep it up. For folks who don't know Coach Martino so well, Coach was a 78 graduate of Marshall High School, and he went to Randolph-Macon College down in Ashland, Virginia. We know him best for he was head coach at Chantilly, coached some great players like Darryl Franklin, John Havey, Tim Fudd, Russell Peyton. Doug Yule, my buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he came to coach at Lake Braddock, and he's been in administration for many years. Coach, I wanted to say a few words. This weekend, Coach Carl Hensley, I think he preceded you by one or two coaches at least at Lake Braddock, but he passed. He was a longtime coach. He was from Tennessee, came up here after college, coached at Edison. Really is one of the first really great coaches that we had in the area. I think he was finishing up by the time you got into the game. But I'm sure you probably know Coach. What are your memories of Coach Hensley?
It's funny. One of the things that it makes me laugh are the outfits that they used to wear. Oh my God, they were polyester, and they were either plaid or they were bright yellow at Lake Braddock with purple. But that being said, what an outstanding basketball coach. You really, like you said, one of the first ones that you truly looked up to as a coach. I was able to have a relationship with him once I got there. He used to come watch games. We'd talk. He'd sit up with Bob Carson, who was the AD, the first AD there, and
recently passed as well.
At Lake Braddock, and those were some of the really bright minds that I used to kind of bounce ideas off of and talk to about that. So it was really nice to have them, kind of to be there as a sounding board. So it's really sad his passing, but what a great role model he was for all of us.
Yeah, me as well. I played with his son Derek, Little League, and then I played against him when I was at Robinson. He was always such a class act.
Absolutely,
a great basketball mind. Well, Coach, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about you is, our mutual friend Doug Yule has stepped down from coaching, and when you coached, I could tell you loved it. You put on a show on the sidelines. Your teams won. You had some fun. You played attractive basketball. The crowds were there. You went to the state tournament. When a coach, a lot of our great coaches get into administration and do other things because, financial reasons, and plus, your next challenge in life. How does a coach make up for all that juice and all that excitement that they leave behind? I mean, I would imagine it's very hard to duplicate some of the excitement that you had when you coached at Chantilly and Lake Braddock.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, you got to kind of put your ego aside a little bit because, part of it is you're kind of that focal point. There's a big crowd there and you're orchestrating and you're, whether your team's doing well or getting beat, it's, there's still a lot of attention on you. And so that probably is the hardest thing. I think for me, it just was the right time. And I'm sure Doug probably feels the same way. You have to kind of put that aside and know, okay, am I looking at the clock during practices where I never used to look at the clock because practice was what you love to do, and are you doing it for the right reasons? And I kind of learned that early on, because I think early when I started coaching, I really thought that it was all about me. We won because of me. And then I think after a few years, you go, wait a minute, that's not what it's about. The kids, and it's about the players, and it's about, just really giving your insight and advice and letting them have fun. And I think that to me was, when I learned that, I became a better coach, much better coach, and enjoyed it more. And the kids had more fun. And that to me was what it was all about. So I think I think you got to put your ego aside now, because when you leave, like you said, now the attention's not on you, and there's a lot of good in that. There's a lot of good in that, and you have to find other things to kind of attract your attention and stuff. But I bet Doug probably feels the same. I would think probably feels the same way.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Mike Dufresne, who played at Mason, played at Osborne for many years. And one thing about coaches can make very good administrators. Some of the things that you do as a coach could be used building wide, and around the country, they are often desired in other roles. Have you found some of the things that you use as a coach to be helpful in your years in administration?
Yeah, I think so. I think mostly it was hopefully trying to find really good coaches. I was fortunate because I was able to hire Brian Metris. And when you coach against a guy and I think we won like 1 out of 12 that I played against him, you figure, okay, if you can't beat him, join him, and say, okay, this guy is the right guy. So you hope that when you're hiring coaches that you have a little insight into really why do they want to do it, and are they going to be good for kids, and is it going to be fun, and are the kids going to enjoy working for them? I think that's part of it. And then also I think part of it is just being around sports, being around and knowing what to look for, and hoping that the athletes and the coaches and the parents enjoy the experience, because as as well as I do, it molds us. It certainly molded me and helped me have a kind of a career, to help have a family, and to help my kids who played in college. And so, I mean, it's just, it's all part of it. So I think it certainly helped me in the second part of my career.
What about the guys like Metris and Bruce Hanson here at Yorktown, the football coach? Some of these guys coach many years. I think Coach Hanson has been there, I think almost 40 years at Yorktown, maybe even more than that. But, Metris is still an innovator, still doing great things at Lake Braddock. Their coaches, Red Jenkins coaching until I believe he's in the 60s. I think most retire around 50, and financially there's a lot of reasons to retire. But what about the guys that stay and coach almost their whole lives? What makes them different, and how are they able to do it for so long?
I think they really love what they're doing, and not that the guys that leave early didn't love what they doing, but I think that was their calling. I think of guys like Brian Metris, who, to me, and I've been around long enough to go from coaches to Red Jenkins all the way through. I think of George McLean, who was at Madison, when I was coaching, Bobby Joe Smith, who was my coach. I mean, Brian Metris to me is the best high school basketball coach I have ever been around. And you got Don McCool, Charlie Thompson, guys that are just elite. Wendell Bird. Yeah. I mean, guys that are just elite coaches, but in terms of, like you said, innovative and what they do. But I think that's it. That's their love. That's their passion. And that's what they do. And like you said, Hanson at Yorktown, I think of Tom Verbanek, who coached for so many years, baseball and football, and is still helping coach. Pete Bendorf, still coaching after all these years. These guys, I mean, they have a gift. And I really, truly believe they have a gift, and them to continue coaching is passing that gift on to those student athletes that are there. And that's really, it's a unique thing.
How did your relationship with coaches change after you got out? I know you talked about Metris. I remember you were a fierce competitor. If you're winning 1 out of 12, I know you must not like Coach Metris.
Yeah, that wasn't a whole lot of fun.
So how'd your relationship with all these coaches that we talked about? How did it change when you got out of coaching? Were you friends with these guys when you coached?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We certainly competed, but I never remember having animosity. There's always a little jealousy, maybe like the Wendell Birds, who were just so successful. And you probably don't know this, but I applied for that job.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, George Zaleski, I think, was the athletic director at South Lakes, and he was also my athletic director at Marshall. Mm-hmm. So when that job opened, now again, I had no idea what I was doing, and obviously he made the right hire. But the Wendell and got Ed Tiernan, who was at Herndon, also an outstanding basketball coach. We were bitter rivals, but there really wasn't animosity. But when you step away from it, I think your relationships change. It's obviously more cordial. You can talk to guys. I never lost a game in the bleachers. I was undefeated, making all my coaching decisions when I was in the bleachers. But really had some good relationships with guys, and it was a lot of fun to compete against those guys, but also to kind of be peers as we went through. That was really a lot of fun.
Yeah. So as an official, and as you know, I referee with your brother Greg.
Yeah.
When I stopped officiating, plus when I started doing social media type stuff, all of a sudden these coaches loved me.
No, absolutely.
I had coaches that never talked to me. I coach for Charlie, and we're friends. Well, we're in contact now. I don't think he ever said 2 words to me when I was officiating his games, or, Coach Bird never talked to me when I was in the. Jim Smith never talked to me when I was official. I can go on and on.
Right.
And now when I talk to these people, I'm like their best friend. It's funny how our relationships have improved when I stopped officiating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
So anyway, I just mentioned Greg, a great guy. But I know you guys are from the area. You went to Marshall. When did your family move to Northern Virginia? If you guys weren't natives, and how did you get into basketball?
I think we moved into our home in Tysons Corner, I think in 1963.
Oh, wow.
So that's all I remember.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad put up a basketball hoop in the driveway, concrete driveway. Half of it was gravel, half of it was concrete. And I just remember being out there with my brother Greg playing and, shoveling off snow, the old story, shoveling off snow in the winter. But I mean, I used to when I was 10, 11, and 12, I played VYI, played for the Saints. My dad coached. That was my first influence. And then playing in the driveway, he's take an egg timer and put like 12 minutes on the clock and play the Lakers versus the Celtics and take the game-winning shot and do all of that. And I remember doing that growing up. That to me those were my first memories of really getting serious about basketball. A little different today. I don't see a whole lot of that anymore.
Exactly. Unless a private trainer is out there putting them through drills.
Right. Yeah.
What neighborhood were you? Were you Pemmon Hills?
No, we were over by Gallows Road, Old Courthouse,
okay.
Right by where 123 goes right down into Vienna. Tysons Corner was a 1-lane road, and so that's where we grew up. And it was great. I couldn't have asked for anything better. We'd go out during the day, and Mom would yell, and we'd come back in for dinner, and But playing, that's kind of where I, played a lot and just did individual stuff. I didn't have a practice plan like you do now and shot 100 shots. I just played, as much as I could.
Yeah. Were your parents athletes?
My dad was a golfer. My dad's actually probably, if back he was a golf course superintendent, but back in the day, if money would have been as good, he would have been a pro golfer. I have things where he beat Sam Snead. He won the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America tournament, like where all the superintendents in the United States played. He won that. He was one of 14 children.
Wow.
From Clarksburg, West Virginia. Yeah. So they were all caddies and golfers. And so I got into golf because of him.
Where's Clarksburg? Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. It's I don't know if you know where Fairmont State is. It's right up there. It's up probably about 45 minutes, an hour from Morgantown.
Okay.
So
did you golf as well? Did you caddy for your father and get
I never caddied for my dad. I watched him play, which was pretty amazing. But I got into it because of him. That was I was probably a better golfer, I think, at 12 than I was now. And then kind of the decision made, okay, do you want to play golf or do you want to play basketball? And basketball is kind of really my first love. So that's kind of how, but my dad was an athlete. Mom wasn't an athlete, but very fortunate to have them as parents. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you were, so I guess you're probably, if you're 1978 class in Marshall, you're probably born about 1960. So basketball was really getting exciting in DC about the time you're coming of basketball playing age, because the Wizards, the Bullets had moved from Baltimore down here. Lefty was building University of Maryland. John Thompson was just getting started. to build at Georgetown.
Yeah.
So Washington was getting ready to go basketball crazy. Who are your first heroes, the guys that you really followed in either college or NBA?
What's funny, even before that, my dad was good friends with, I don't know if you remember, Clint Hanna.
Yeah, of course.
Who was basketball coach at Madison. And that was really my first look at going to watch games. We used to go watch the Madison Marshall games back in the early 70s. Andre Polly. I mean, that's a name from the past. I think there was a guy, Greg Stevenson, who played back. I mean, these guys, Carl Bailey at Marshall. And I remember going to those games and barely being able to get a seat. And I remember hearing the Sweet Georgia Brown song and thought it was great. And then I heard it on the Globetrotters and thought the Globetrotters had stolen it from Madison because I never had heard it before. And so those were my first memories of, like really just going, wow, I love this. And then the Bullets. I remember I went to when they played in the championship game here. And was able to go to see that when they so those are my first memories. The college stuff, probably Lefty was the one that stands out the most, just because he was so gregarious and just out there and wanted to be the UCLA of the East, so to speak. That was his big thing. So that's what I remember mostly.
So what do you remember about going to Marshall? Now, you were there. Ed Henry was the football coach in the early 70s. I think Coach Mark Bendorf had been there playing, and I think Pete was four or 5 years younger, probably about your age.
Yep.
What are your first memories about going to Marshall? This is the post Watergate years, post hippie years. What was Marshall like then?
It was pretty tense. There were some pretty racial divides going on there during the time. There was so it was Pemmon Hills had a particular area, and then so it was a tough time, but it was also, I just remember a really good time for me. I mean, my friends Art Williams and the Warhursts, who went to school there and all played sports through there. And I just remember just kind of really being into it, whether it was being part of the class or working on the floats or playing basketball. I played baseball for Dean Sisler, who was coach for a number of years there. But it was a pretty intense time during that time, but it was a good time. I enjoyed my career there, and my life there was good.
Where did the Black students from Marshall come from? What neighborhoods did the Black students come from?
I know that right down the street from where I live, Frank Street, right off of Electric Avenue. That's where my friend Art Williams lived, and Carol Johnson, who was the point guard on our high school team, lived right in that area, right behind Kilmer. Yeah, right behind that area right there. I think Pemmon Hills was more of, it wasn't really the Black area, if I remember at the time. Not at that time. It was the opposite of that over there. So I remember there was a distinction there. But I remember just kind of my neighborhood, and right behind us is where a lot of my friends came from.
So how about basketball? When you started Marshall, did you have the reputation of being a good player? Had you played some travel?
No. I mean, I don't even remember what I never played travel anything. I played VYI till I was 12, and then we tried out for the high school team. That's what we did. And first coach was Pat Dolan. He was my freshman basketball coach, and I was 13th man on a 12-man squad. Wow. I was about 5'3", weighed about 100 pounds maybe, and did not play very much at all. And we were pretty good, had a pretty good team. And then my JV year, I was about 5'10" when I was a sophomore, and I remember two of my teammates. Mike Tilton was a really good shooter, and he scored 25 points in the game and got moved up to varsity. And then Mike McNamara was another good student, good at player, left-handed. He scored 25 points and moved up to varsity. I finally got a chance to play, and I scored 25 points one game and stayed on JV. And it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I was able to play and do those things. So, but then when I became a junior, I started to, I was 6'1", started to get a little bit, filled out a little bit and became a little better player. And then, senior year, I had a really good senior year. So that was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah. Did you ever think about that when you became a coach, a varsity coach, when you have these freshmen and they're not full grown yet, and you have a lot of kids in that pool that have been stars their whole life because their dad was a coach of Little League or whatever, and they could be dominant. Do you ever think about that? How you were 13th man, and you never know which of those freshman kids are going to develop. They're going to grow differently, and everyone has their time.
Absolutely. And there were a couple of kids. I remember a kid named Richard Gibson who played with us at Chantilly, and his junior year, he played on the JV, and he was, like 6'5", but he was, he just hadn't really figured it out yet, but then had a great senior year with us. And yeah, it would probably help for me to be able to go through that, to be able to see that as a coach and know this guy's got something, it's just not there yet. And you just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, okay, you're not good enough because another kid who's 14 is already 6'2", but he may be done. That may be it for him, so I think that's really important. And you make mistakes. I'm sure I made 100 mistakes, cutting kids or not playing them enough or whatever. We all do that because it's a judgment. You're doing the best you think, that you can do. But I think it did help me probably kind of have a little idea that this kid may be really good. Just give him a chance. He may be really good.
Yeah. So what was Marshall like in terms of basketball programs? I know the coach, Bobby Joe Smith, I believe was his name. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a legitimary figure, like another West Virginia guy. And I know that he's very well thought of. So what was Marshall's program like, and what was Coach Smith like?
We were pretty good. Now, remember back then, I think only 8 teams went to the regional tournament. So it was a little tougher, to get in at that time. And we had some really, really good teams. I think Madison was a little better than us, and we were in the same conference. But we had Mike Brown, who was a great player who pitched for the Red Sox. We had Wade Henkel, who went on, I think, to play at Ohio State. I mean, this was before I got there. So teams were really, really good. I remember how intense games were, but in small gyms, you didn't have these big, at least I don't remember playing in the big gyms. I remember Dick Wickline was the coach of Jefferson, and they were really good. And I think we actually may have made it to the regional tournament my senior year, and they knocked us off, but they were really good. Games were fun. We had a good group of guys. We had groups that and at that time you kind of went through together. You were a freshman team, you were a JV team, you were a varsity team, unless you were just an outstanding athlete and were brought up. But teams were good. Bobby Joe was tough. He had some, he had the Kearney brothers. We had the Kearney brothers. I don't know if you remember them at all.
I know Tim played at West Virginia.
Tim played at West Virginia. And I remember Steve played also. Steve was the bigger brother, but I remember Tim was I want to say a sophomore my senior year. And I remember Coach Smith bringing me in and just saying, no, you got to toughen him up. We got to toughen him up. And, we'd bang him around and stuff like that, but it was good. It helped me kind of figure out a little bit about how to play the game. So I enjoyed my time there. That's for sure.
Did you learn anything about coaching that you would use as a coach yourself from Coach Smith?
I think probably more than anything else, I think the focus. I think just being singularly focused. I think there was an article written that it was like Smith-Martino relationship faces another test tonight. And I remember him coming up to me saying, look, I need you to know that I'm going to be yelling at you all the time, that no matter what happens and who does something wrong, I'm going to yell at you. Can you take it? And of course, I'm like, yeah, sure, coach. What are you going to say? No, so you do it. So I remember, that I learned a little bit about that, like, trusting players and finding out if they can take what you can do. Cause everybody's different. You can't just yell at some kids are better. Some players were better if they had that positive. Somebody could take it. They wanted to be pushed a little bit. So I think I learned a little bit of that from him.
Yeah. Well, I understand there was a really good Madison team around 75 and 76, I believe was rated #1 in the Washington Post for much of the year. I believe they got upset because I think TC Williams might have gone to state that year. This is not the year they were undefeated, TC.
Right.
But in 75, I think that was a really good Madison team. Do you remember that team? You probably would have been on JV freshman.
I'm trying to remember if that was, I don't remember the players in that. The most of what I remember from Madison is I remember Bobby Brower and Mark Merrill and and those guys that were more my year, and those are the guys I remember mostly from Madison at that time. But I do remember we were really good before, like you said, in 75, 76, we had Mike Brown. We had really good, but we could never get past Madison. They were that good. You remember any of the names of the guys that were on the Madison?
It'll come to me. If I try right now, I won't catch it. But
sure.
We were talking about them the other day on Facebook. It'll come to me. It'll frustrate me. How about the 77 Titans, the team? Red Jenkins says it's the best team he's ever seen in Northern Virginia. The undefeated team, one state, used to come out to sweet Georgia Brown with the Chuck Taylors. Did you ever see that team play?
Oh yeah, and I think Mike Henson was the coach of them, and they were legit, and they'd come out. I think they'd circle the gym. I think they'd run around the gym, circle with their finger up in the air, #1, and they were impressive. They were just an impressive group, and they played so hard, and they were so talented, and they intimidated you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were really almost down 10 before the tip off.
Yeah. I think it was really a golden age of Northern Region basketball, because in 76, Lee, with Bucky Roman and Roscoe Dean was a coach, had lost in the state final by a few points to Clyde Austin from Maggie Walker. 77, TC won it. 78, Robinson, unfortunately, my school, we missed a couple foul shots. Our star player, Greg Dennis.
Was that Greg Dennis, and was that Mike Tissaw?
It was
and
Tissaw,
those guys? Yeah.
Kurt Lee, Kraninsky, those guys.
Winston Streeter.
Yeah.
The nastiest football player I'd ever seen play on the field. He was like 5'5", I think.
He was a linebacker.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. That Robinson team won the region in basketball, football, and baseball. I believe the last team to actually do that. But then in 79, Mount Vernon won the state, and then 81, Lee won. It was just a golden year, and I think it's because Flint Hill hadn't Carlos Shates was getting ready to go to Flint Hill, but they were getting ready to start taking some of our talent, but it hadn't happened yet, and all the best players were at the public schools playing in front of those packed gyms you were just talking about.
Yeah, so, and you had great coaches.
Yeah,
I mean, Charlie Thompson and Don McCool. I'm trying to remember who was the coach at Robinson at the time. What was Jones?
It was Will Jones and then Roscoe Dean.
Roscoe Dean. Oh my God, that's right. Yeah, Will Jones. I remember. Will Jones was flamboyant, boy. He was something else. I think he ended up going to. Didn't he go to college level and coach?
He went to UDC, won a national championship. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I remember. Yep.
Yeah, I'll send you my interview with Red Jenkins. He tells incredible Will Jones stories.
Oh, so, I bet he does. I bet some of them are true. So
Red, it's a high percentage. It's better than
absolutely. But yeah, they I remember those, and like I said, I think the coaching was so good. You had, like you said, everybody was there. You wanted to play. Like I wanted to play. At first, when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to play for Madison because we were friends with Clint Hanna, who was the coach. My dad knew him, so we went to all their games. Mm-hmm. But then all my friends were going to go to Marshall, and that's where I was going to go. And so I kind of gravitated there. But that's where you wanted to go. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to go to. Not that there's anything wrong with O'Connell or whatever. You wanted to go to your local school and play. That's what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So, how has coaching changed in terms of prestige of coaches? Now, I remember when a guy like Carl Hensley, yourself, these when coaches would come around, I mean, they were guys, oh, that's so and so. It was a big deal to be a coach. How has that changed over the years from the late 60s and 70s? Your first memories of it until when you coach until now.
I've been out of it for about for a while, obviously. I just think like when I this is what I wanted to do. I mean, and hate to say this, it'll probably make me sound terrible, but I, sometimes you felt like I taught so that I could coach. And then I became a much better teacher. And I think those two kind of coincided. It's really hard now. I'm not sure and I'm sure there are a lot that are still like we were too, but it's hard to find coaches. I mean, we're seeing that in, when we talk to schools and they're saying, okay, well, we have to find coaches out of the building. I never remember that when I was coaching. All my coaches were teachers and we all coached together, and we practiced when we could because we were all together. And now, coaches could be, they apply for a job and they get it, but they could be working in, Maryland somewhere. So you can't practice till 8 o'clock at night because they can't get there. And I just think it's a different animal now. I think teaching and coaching it's harder. I think it's a lot harder. I think the stipulations on coaches are harder. I think there's a lot of pressure on them. Not that we, I think there's just, there's the mental awareness that probably wasn't there when we were there. The idea of making sure kids, felt good about themselves and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think we ever did anything harmful, but I'm not sure we weren't aware of that as it is so aware now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's just different. I think it's different. I think coaches they're harder to find. It's harder to find somebody that really that's their calling, that's their life. They want to teach, they want to coach, and they want to do that. Like the Red Jenkins of the day, and Bobby Joe Smith, and Charlie Thompson, and Wendell Bird, and I mean I could name them. The coach Bobby Veldrin.
Bob Veldrin, yeah.
I mean, again, one of my truly really good friends, and guy we had battle after battle with, and we'd play golf in the summer and laugh. And I don't know if that's still around. I don't want to say it's not because I'm not in it anymore, but I don't see it like I did back in the day.
That's too bad. So, well. How did you decide on Randolph-Macon for college?
I think they kind of decided on me. I didn't really have a lot of choices. I remember I knew I wanted to play, and my dad had gone to Fairmont State, and JoJo Retton was the head basketball coach at Fairmont State, and he was a legend. And it was a Division II school, and I remember going up there. And I remember playing with them at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And by 7:30, I knew I wasn't good enough. I mean, they were so good. And I was a little discouraged. And I actually went down to Madison College, not JMU, but Madison College. And Lou Campanella was down there at the time. And he had seen me play, and he said I could come walk on. So I was like, okay, so that was that. And then I tried out for the Capital Classic back then. We had the preliminary game. We tried out. And I remember making it through, like there was like 40 of us, and we got down to 20, and I got cut. I was covering Billy Fields. I don't know if you remember him from Osborne. So that was a mismatch. Let's just go there.
Providence.
Yeah, Providence. Yeah. And I played pretty well, and I remember walking out to the parking lot, and Coach Nunnally came out, and in his voice, "Hey boy." And I turned around and said, "I'm Coach Nunnally from Randolph-Macon College, and do you mind if we talk for a few minutes?" And we did. And he said, "I think you got a future." And he asked me if I shaved yet, and I said no. And what size feet do you have? And he looked at my hands and thought I was going to grow some more. And basically, I had never even heard of Randolph-Macon College. No idea where it was, who it was, and it was a Division II school back then. And basically offered me a 25% scholarship, which I think school was about $4,400 then. And I think I got 1,100 or 1,300, something like that, which still was still, and it was still a lot of money for my parents back in the day. And that's kind of how I ended up there. That was it. It's crazy.
So, yeah. So what was Ashland like in those days?
It was different. It was, there was a train that goes right through the middle, almost the middle of campus, on the end of campus. So I had to get used to that. It was good for me because it was close enough to home. I was really homesick my first year. I got mono and was really homesick, so it was good. I could get home a little bit, but it was a different, like every, well, you have townies, that are like every small college like that has, so they're unique. But the basketball program was really important to me. It kind of helped me fit in. So it was a really good place for me. And they had just lost the Division II national championship in '77. So, their program was really good. So I think the kid who played at Chantilly was down there, Stuart Nelson. He played at Chantilly, in the early '70s, and he was a sophomore my freshman year. So it was a good fit for me.
What was the adjustment process to the Division II level? Were you able to come in and get playing time right away, or did you have to kind of?
No, I mean, they were really good. There was another kid, Paul Gartland, and his dad was Senator Gartland. I think his sister Joan Gartland was on Channel 7. I don't even know if you remember her from back in the day, but he was a really good player. He went to I think he went to PVI. No, he went to Bishop Ireton and had come down there. So team was really good. I played JV my freshman year. There was a bunch of us. We had a JV schedule, which was good. Played like Fork Union, played against Melvin Turpin at Fork Union. Didn't play much my freshman year. Got some playing time my sophomore year is when I kind of started to, kind of get a little bit more playing time. And played, maybe 15 minutes a game. Actually was a defensive person, which is unique because I'm not sure I played any in high school. And then played a little bit more my junior year, and then had a good. It was almost kind of mirrored my high school career. Was kind of the same way. You just kind of earn your stripes and work at the game, and that was where I did more off-season stuff, I think, than anything.
Yeah. What was the Division II environment back in those days? Did it seem like a big-time college basketball, or is it similar to what Division III would be like today? Or
yeah, it was difficult. Division II, it's really back then. Division II was Mount St. Mary's with Jim Phelan, bow tie. They were unbelievable. And it was UDC back in Virginia Union. I played against Charles Oakley.
Wow.
I think my first layup went about 4 rows up into the bleachers. We actually held the ball against them my senior year. We got beat 31-29. And, they were number 1 in the country, I think. And we were like number 7. And I may be making that up, but they were 2 really good teams. And, one side of the bleachers was all black. The other side was, it was, and they weren't real happy with us holding the ball at our own place. And so I remember the tenseness of that game, every possession, and the talking that was going back and forth between, the coaches. I think Dave Robbins was the coach at Virginia Union back then, and him and Coach Nunnally were good friends. So I just remember that environment. Going to play in the Mount and the airplane hangar before they got their new facility was unbelievable. But most of the schools that we were Division II schools, and now almost all of them are Division III. It's hard now. It would be hard now to have a Division II schedule. You'd have to go into North Carolina more, and maybe up into Pennsylvania with like Shepherd and Shippensburg, I think, maybe stuff like that. So yeah, the basketball was really, really good. We got to play UVA every year. That was great. I played Jeff Jones, and I became very good friends. Got to play against Ralph Sampson. There were games we'd go down, we'd get beat almost the same score every year. It was always like 81-54 or something, and we'd get a nice check, and from playing for them, we'd drive back to Ashland. So it was fun.
And you guys played George Mason every year, because I think I may have even saw either your team or at least one of the teams play.
Yep. Played in the PE building. We played in the PE building. Yep. And because I think they may have been Division II at that time. I can't remember if they were Division I at that time, but I remember playing against them, and those games were always really good. They were good. David Scaff, I think, played for them back in the day. I'm throwing names names are just coming to me that back. But that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, David Scaff was a great shooter. I think Neoff's freshman year they played together, and that was the year Gaddy was out with the injury. Andre Gaddy, their 6'10" coach, was out with an injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Harrington the coach then? Was Joe Harrington the coach at that time?
Harrington got the job in '79. So he probably, probably was the coach when you were there. Yeah. And they were Division I, because he wouldn't have taken that job from the University of Maryland if it wasn't.
Probably. Yep.
So what did you learn from Coach Nunnally? I know he's got a great reputation. I know Rod Wood gave him a lot of credit for some of the things that he did at Mary Washington.
Yeah, probably, I would say probably 70 to 75% of my coaching, like what I learned basketball wise, came from him.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, practice plans, drills that we used, he was probably, it was one of the brightest minds I've ever met in my life. And he was so socially different than you would expect of a basketball coach. Cause I think he was a manager in high school. He was from Petersburg. Then he coached a high school down there. So he wasn't an athlete growing up, but his knowledge of the game was unbelievable. I know he was really good friends with Terry Holland, and they used to talk before seasons, and people would seek him out to get his knowledge. That's how good of a basketball mind he was. And so I would say 70 to 75% of what I did when I came up and started to coach at the high school level was based on what I learned at Randolph-Macon. Because I don't really remember that. I know it's going to sound odd. I don't remember that much about high school playing other than the games. I don't remember the practices, but I remember the Randolph-Macon practices. Yeah. I remember all the drills. I remember everything that we did back then. And that's, the shell drill, the moving drill, the 31 combo. I mean, I could go on and on about all the things that we did that I incorporated when I started coaching.
It's interesting, Coach, in that in Northern region coaches, they tend to all derive from certain trees. Like they could be from McCool School or the Charlie School. And so you're always unique. You never fit into any of those buckets. And I guess it's because you coached the way you learned from Nunnally.
Right.
You probably did not fit into those. So when did you decide you wanted to be a coach, and what was that process to get into coaching?
It's funny because I think probably after my sophomore year, when I had, meetings with Coach Nunnally, and he talked about, he kept saying, one of the things that impresses me the most about you. I mean, I was not a great jumper or a great shooter, or, I didn't have that physical, athleticism, but he said it's your knowledge of the game and your intelligence. I was a pump fake guy. You can ask Bobby Brower, because Bobby Brower could jump literally out of the gym, and I used to get him in foul trouble all the time. And the same thing in college. It was so at that point, I think is when I thought, what, maybe this is what I want to do. Like this, I love this. I love playing. I love trying to figure things out. And sports has always been such a big part of my life. So I think probably after my sophomore year in college, because I was funny because I was going to be a German major. That's what I was going to start at. And then first of all, I wasn't very good at it. So that was hard. And then I ended up being an English major, and that enabled me to, and I was a, education minor and did my student teaching, and then I was able to kind of funnel all of that together. And I think Coach Dolan helped with that too. In the off season, I think I coached the summer team for him, and he asked, if you're going to be a teacher, would you like to coach? And so that kind of pushed me in that direction.
Then you got a job in Fairfax County after?
Yeah, I started actually, I got a job. Ed Ryan was the principal at Falls Church High School. And I got a job as a part-time ESL aide. that was what was opening. And that was the freshman basketball coach at Falls Church. And then about halfway through my first year, I got a full-time teaching job because the student base was overloaded. They had a lot of students. And so I got a job, and he said, I'm going to give you four English classes. I said, that's great. And he goes, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the teachers decide who your students are. So the teachers were able to handpick, their students. And then there were a couple of that had just transferred in. So my classes were rough the first couple of years, or first year, but it was good. It was good. I was fortunate to get a job, fortunate to be at a good place where Ed Ryan was the principal, John Hollowell was the AD, Pat Dolan was the basketball coach, and brought me in and allowed me to coach the freshman team. And we had some great athletes there. I don't know if you know the name John Kerr, who's
I remember the name. I haven't heard it in years.
He's the head soccer coach at Duke. He played basketball. Bernard Gray played at Clemson soccer. We had 2 soccer players that started varsity basketball. And literally, we kicked more balls out of bounds. It's a referee; it would have driven you crazy.
Exactly.
Those guys were amazing, and so that was a lot of fun because I was an assistant on the varsity. I'd sit on the bench for those games, and that was a blast. That was my first real. I was like, okay, I got to do this. This is what I want to do.
Before I forget, the Madison player was Jeff Houston, on the star player of that team, 75 team.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. I knew it would come to me. So how did you get the job over at Chantilly?
So I was at Falls Church for I think 5 years, and then the Chantilly job came open, and actually one of my good friends now, wasn't then. He was a sophomore. And his dad, his name was Mike Brown. His brother, Jeff Brown, had played at Chantilly. His dad, Dave Brown, was a regional park authority guy, really good guy. And I think he went into the principal, who was George Kime at the time, really, and said, look, I know you're looking for a basketball coach. Would you mind spending a half hour talking to me about it? And the principal said, sure. Sometimes when you get parents like that, you're like, uh-oh. But he was just saying, look, I know you're going to hire, but I've watched this guy, my kids played, I watched this guy coach. I think he could do a really good job. If he applies, give him an opportunity. And so the job came available and I applied. I wasn't really sure about it because it was, Chantilly was way, way out there at the time. I lived in Tysons, and, Chantilly was way out on the sticks, then. And so I applied for the job and was fortunate enough that I was hired, and I was fortunate, I had good players, good team. I remember I was actually at the game they lost in the regional tournament, where Chantilly lost to Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon had 6 guys on the court, and guy threw in a 80, maybe 60, 70-foot one-handed shot at the buzzer to beat Chantilly, Mount Vernon, to knock them out of the regional tournament. That was the last game that Doug Krupper coached at Chantilly.
So that would have been probably spring of 87 or
yeah. So crazy. Just crazy. And then so I got the job, and it was good. I was lucky, very, very lucky.
So Krupper's a guy I know. I know his son coached at he was a South Lake Summer League coach for years.
Yeah.
I as well.
Yeah.
Good dude. And I played against Coach Krupper at Chantilly. Chantilly did not have a basketball tradition. It wasn't that they were bad, but as you were saying, the western part of the county was still growing. And it was, you did have great timing in terms of demographics and stuff. But how important is culture? So like when you have a building where they haven't won, and then you were going to turn it around quickly, and you were going to go to the state tournament 2 out of 3 years at one point. And then later on, you'd go to Lake Braddock, a whole different culture.
Right.
How important is the culture of a building, or is it basically just the players that you have and the talent that you have?
Obviously the players are important. You got to have people that can play. And, I was fortunate. My first year, I had David Herbster, who ended up going to Virginia Tech. I had Robert Harper, had Terry Warren, who was, but yeah, it was more of a football school when I got there, but had good basketball. So the talent was there. I think for me, it was just more of making them feel like basketball was really important, and that we're gonna change. I think what Doug did was what Doug knew, and Crupper, and what he coached and how he coached. And he ran the flex offense. That was his gig, and they were very solid in it. They were good defensively. I was a passing game coach. I learned from Coach Nunnally. I was a big Bobby Knight fan of how he coached basketball, not him maybe personally and a lot of the antics, but I mean, I actually went to Indiana and watched 3 practices. So before the 3-point line and the shot clock really kind of came into, man, the passing game to me it was much more of a, let's learn how to play the game instead of, okay, let's run here. We're going to learn how to play the game and read defenses, cut, screen, do all those kind of things. So I think that was it. And I wanted to make them feel important. We got our own locker room. I put carpet in the locker room. I put nameplates up for every guy. So they came in, they knew that's where they were. It just tried to make them feel as if, hey, this is a big deal. We got posters made with pictures of all the guys. I think I still have them. I mean, so that was kind of my goal, was to kind of spotlight them a little bit. That's what we tried to do.
It's a big adjustment going from JV coach to varsity coach, because a varsity coach leads the program. I mean, you're ahead of the other coaches, whereas a JV coach, it's still basketball, but you're focused on your own team. Is that a big adjustment for a coach to make?
Yeah, I think so, because I think, you really now have 35 or 40 kids that are in your program, and you have all their parents, and you have all their coaches, and you don't, it's not the freshman coach's responsibility to, deal with issues that are outside his parameter. That should be your job. So yeah, it does. It's a whole different ball of wax when you become the head of the program, because if something happens on the freshman team, as much as it may have to deal with the freshman coach, it's still your program, and you need to deal with that. And so that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, I think one of your biggest early wins is I did a podcast with Russell Peyton and some of the other guys that were in the Final Four in '88. It was Jason Coleman from Lake Braddock. It was Barry Smith from Mount Vernon, and the fourth one was Bill Courtney from Lee. But anyway, Russell Peyton, who's one of my favorite players to ever play in the
unbelievable
area. Very underrated player. Just it's all up here with him. He told a story that after you guys beat South Lakes on their home floor in the round of 16 in regionals, I guess you guys had to share locker rooms with them because their locker room was under construction, and they were crying in the locker room after you beat them. This is Russell's story, and South Lakes has never actually agreed.
Corroborated it.
Yeah, they never have. So, do you remember that game though? And was it a big win for your program?
Yeah, I remember, and I don't know if he'll remember this, but I remember, we basically would go over there and we'd play really well, but they'd beat us. And I think Grant was a freshman. Mm-hmm. I think Jerome Scott may have been a senior that year. So. And I remember I'd said, okay, we took a bus over it. We always did. And we went in a different entrance. We drove around to the other side and came in the other side just to do something different. And I remember that. And I think I think that was really kind of let us believe we were that good, because I think we were maybe 10-10 going into the game. We were the 4 seed, and they were the 1 seed, and we just played. It was ridiculous. I mean, we couldn't have played any better. And then we hung on at the end, because I think we shot. I want to say we were like 9 for 10 in the first quarter, and I think we were up by 10, and we hung on toward the end there. But yeah, it was packed. The place was packed, and it was really it was probably the best of a team that wasn't super talented, but had all the right little pieces. Russell and Dwayne Franklin and Mike Brown, who was a senior then, who was an outstanding, smart, really good player. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, one of your best teams you ever had, either the next year or 2 years later. I think it was the next year, because Russell only played 2 years on varsity.
Right.
But you had Russell, John Havey, Chris Whittick, who I see from time to time, outside shooter, went to UVA.
Yeah.
John Havey went to UVA. And I believe walked on and played some JV ball at least.
Yeah.
That was a great team. John was an excellent post player. You can go high, low post. Chris could fill it up, and Russell just ran the show for you. Was that one of your favorite teams that you coached?
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. They were and again, that was back in the day when, every Wednesday morning we'd all get the Washington Post and look and see who won games and stuff like that. And on Saturday, do that. And Chris Haddock was also on that team, and he may have been a year before. He may have been before that. But that was really important, like, knowing who did what, and that they were so tied in. They were so engaged in what was going on. Those guys were so fundamentally sound. And John was a fundamentally sound kid. He was not a super athlete, but he'd catch a ball on the block, turn and score. He was tough. And Russell you talk about having a coach on the floor. It's really easy to coach when you got a guy like Russell Peyton or Darryl Franklin that are running your point guard. You really look smart on the bench when those guys are running the show. And they were just so bought in. They bought into everything we were doing, and they wanted to be really good. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
Did a great
it was
job.
really it was a fun team.
Yeah. So I believe you guys lost in the regional. You won the regional final against West Springfield.
But that was with Darryl's group.
That was 2 years. So
we lost in the regional final. I think we lost to South Lakes. It was Grant's senior year, and again, stories seem to get better, or more embellished. But I remember, I think we had the ball. We were tied, or we were down one with like 30 seconds to go, and John got the ball on the post, turned and made his little patented move, and I think Grant went up and caught it. I don't even think he blocked it. I think he caught it. Yeah. And they beat us, 65-62 or something like that in a regional final game. Just really, it was an outstanding game.
Do you remember how big a crowd that was that day at Robinson?
You couldn't, you literally, it was hard to get from the locker room to the floor to play. And that's what I remember. And I think the move to George Mason was great, but you missed that. Yeah. You missed, really just not being able to move and the sense that just everybody was on top of you. That to me was what it was all about.
It was just electric, the intensity.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then this is probably not a great memory, but it was one of the greatest high school games I've ever seen, or at least at the state tournament. You guys go to the state tournament and you play Petersburg.
Kenny Harris.
Kenny Harris was a player that was not heavily recruited at all, and then he caught fire his senior year.
Yeah,
they moved him from the 2 guard to the 1 guard, and he ended up going to Carolina and was just an incredible player. Do you remember that game?
Oh yeah, I remember. I think we started off in man-to-man. And, again, I don't remember, all the particulars, but we couldn't stop him. We couldn't stay in front of him. We couldn't stop him. I think we were down 12-2. And I remember my assistant coach, Stan Meadows, who was outstanding. He looked at me and goes, we may want to change our defense up here a little bit. And I was like, I think you're right. And we changed to a 1-3-1, kind of slowed him down a little bit. And from there on, it was just, bucket after going back and forth. And we got a little bit of a lead, and then they'd come back and take the lead. And then we go into 1 overtime. That was at the University of Richmond, I think. I think we played at the University of Richmond. And that was a tough one because I think we lost in triple overtime. Just absolutely just intense. You couldn't ask for anything more. You talk about guys with tears and stuff like that coming in. That was a tough one.
It's one of those games, and anyone who was there will never forget it. It was a great game. And, when you have a guy like Kenny Harris, a headline guy like that. But, the thing I liked about that game, if you remember in the 80s, Northern Region teams were beginning to go to state tournament and holding the ball. We're not good enough. We can't play with these guys.
Right.
And I never liked that because to me, and even our greatest coaches like, Don McCool would do it. But I believe you have to come out on the front foot. You gotta let people know that you can play with them. Right. And you guys went toe to toe with them, and it was it was one of those games that you'll never forget.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great experience, and I mean, couldn't have asked them to do anything more. I mean, really couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then I think you had to rebuild the next year, but then 2 years later, you guys have another team that's going to end up going to state and actually play another great team. But that was Darryl Franklin, and you coach his older brother Dwayne Franklin, who was a great baseball player, very good basketball player as well. So what was Darryl like to coach? Darryl and Tim Fudd were on this team.
Yeah, we had, and that's the team that I think had Jimmy Taylor. It also
that was Jimmy. Okay.
Yeah, it had Jimmy Taylor. It had Shane Clancy, who could really fill it up. And we were by far, I think, the most talented team start to bottom. I mean, just all five across the board. I mean, we just really had a really nice team. And again, you had a guy like Darryl who, I mean, he could get from point A to point B, in a heartbeat. And Tim was just coming into his own as a big guy. He was full bore. Tim went from running around the gym as a junior, like running into the ball rack and falling down, to just becoming a prolific scorer. But he worked at it. I mean, he worked so hard at it. And we were pretty high octane at that time. I mean, we wanted to push the ball. We wanted to get the shots up quickly. We could defend. We could get after people. I think we beat Centerville. Centerville was trying that Loyola Marymount style back in the day. I think Todd, I'm trying to remember Todd's last name, who was coaching at Centerville at that time. Todd Crowley, yeah. So he was going to do that, and I think we won like 110-70. We just absolutely obliterated them. And I remember I had to take Tim. Tim had his first dunk and then screamed at the top of his lung all the way down the court. I had to take him out and wouldn't play him anymore. He was mad at me, but he was both those guys were so dialed in to playing. They played for each other. That was kind of cool. They really liked each other. They hung out together. They had a goal in mind that they wanted to do. And that was a great group. But again, it's amazing how little coaching you have to do, because you've done all your preparation and practice, and you've watched them play, and they played together as juniors, and you're just watching them play, and obviously you coach, but it's more, you get to watch, and that was a lot of fun.
It's also a lot of fun watching Shane Clancy. Not many players can stop and pop like him, and I think he had transferred to Flint Hill or another school, and he came back.
Yep.
And he was such a key part of that team, because you had to guard him.
Oh, absolutely. And Shane did not lack of confidence. We played in the Washington Post tip-off tournament or holiday tournament. And I remember he came in, and may have been with Darryl or whatever, and he kept saying, Coach, I'm not sure our offense, you're working with pea shooters when you got guns right here, they can flat it up. I mean, they weren't scared to come in and talk to me and stuff like that. But he had some confidence, but he could really fill it up, and he learned to be a really good overall player, and that was a lot of fun. But it was perfect, because Darryl could penetrate and kick it out to him, to Jimmy Taylor, who could shoot it from 12 to 15 left-handed. We had a kid named Drew Harsh who played with us. He was about 6'2", but about 200 pounds. It was and then of course you had Timmy, who was just a monster inside. So it was a good group. I was very fortunate that group and again, there wasn't really talk too much about going to private schools, or I don't even remember AAU being that big of a deal. For us, it was, we played summer league, to play together in summer league. I don't remember the travel aspect of it, even back then, being as important as it seems to be right now.
Yeah. Well, that regional final, you played Jim Warren, a coach we didn't talk much about, but he was another great coach.
Another great coach, absolutely.
Old school coach. And his teams were very disciplined. They were very prepared, and you never knew what he was going to throw at you, because he was a tactician. And they had Jamie Warren. Yeah. They had Barry Stunson, rest in peace. Yeah. They had a really talented bunch. And I believe you guys beat them in the regional final.
Yeah, beat them in the regional final. I think we beat West Potomac maybe in the semifinals. They were also very talented. Two different styles, though. I mean, West Potomac and West Springfield were two different styles, and so
West Potomac had that kid who went to South Carolina and played, a great athlete. Can't think of his name. Incredible shooter.
yeah, yeah, they were really good, and but West Springfield was so talented too, and so and like you said, very well coached, and it was a great game. I think I can't remember what the score was, but I think I don't think the game came down to the wire. I think we had I think we had a pretty good buffer there for the most part. But again, you got guys like that in those big games. It's not a lot of coaching goes down. When you're playing in a championship game, you've done all your work.
Yeah.
And now it's just let them go play. And if you have to put an out of bounds play in, or you're making things like that, that's fine. But they were really good. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, you go to state, and I believe it was in Williamsburg this time.
Do we have to talk about that one?
Yeah. Well, I hear well, Springfield loses, and I believe they draw Booker T. Washington or somebody else, and they end up upsetting them, and they get to the semis where they almost beat George Wythe.
Yep.
You guys draw Bayside, and Bayside had an incredible story because they had no sports basketball tradition at all.
Right.
They hired a new coach the year before. They had an insane crowd that would just sing songs and just sing crazy stuff. And Shane
take
Clancy,
your coat and hat and leave.
And Shane Clancy, who I agree is never short on confidence, says you guys were really sick. Everyone got on the bus sick that day.
Yeah, there were some issues there. But they had the two brothers. I think they were the Williams brothers. I think they went to VMI, maybe.
Ronell Williams, and they had a guy named Mario Mullen who played at Old Dominion.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we didn't get off to a good start, and we just, you know what, we just never had a chance. They basically just whitewashed us a little bit. I remember I was trying to be funny. I went to the scorekeeper and pulled out a $20 bill and said, "Could you do a running clock here in the second half?" So, yeah, it was over early. And sometimes those things happen to you. You hate to happen to you for those guys in that situation. But sometimes it does. And like I said, I'm not sure we were 100%. I don't think we would have beaten them. I think they were better. They were certainly better than us that night, but I think they were better. But I would have liked to have had us at full strength, and we'd had a better showing. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's too bad. Well, you end up going over to Lake Braddock. I used to live in Lake Braddock many years ago. What is the culture? What is the feel of Lake Braddock as compared to Chantilly? I mean, it's a huge school. Yeah. It's got the big gym where everything's going on at once. You got to share space. What's it like to coach at Lake Braddock?
It was good. It was hard to get used to a little bit at first because it definitely was a little bit of a different culture. And they hadn't been real successful. And I was following a friend, Gary Reed, he's a friend of mine. But they wanted to make a change. So what I tried to do was kind of bring over kind of some of the things that I had done at Chantilly in terms of little things like, locker room. Let's get our own locker room. Let's put nameplates up. Let's put a carpet in the locker room. Let's make this space. Let's make you want to be here. And so that was the biggest thing. And then the other thing there that I tried to do, which is what I tried to do at Chantilly, was be part of all the other programs that were there. I announced the football games. And I had great relationship with Francis Dahl. You want to talk about a legend, and obviously he's passed away. And Danny Grahl was the baseball coach, another guy who was so successful. Bob Digby, track coach, who was amazing. Melissa Trowbridge had just won the state tournament, I think, in girls basketball. They were 31-0. So for me, it was trying to fit in with them and supporting them, supporting the football team, supporting the baseball team, the track program, the girls basketball program, and becoming part of that. And I think that was the biggest thing. It took us a little while, I think, to do that. But I think that was really what I tried to do when I got there, and wanted guys that if you can play football and play basketball, you can play basketball and play baseball. We never had that issue with Francis or Danny or I about, okay, you can only play basketball. Don't play these other sports. Or if you're a football player, you can't. I mean, I had Jason Giska, who played at University of Richmond in football, and he played for us. And Connor Marsden, who was a great football player and played basketball for us. And so there, so that I think that was the biggest thing, was to kind of become part of that community. We are Lake Braddock, not just basketball or whatever. So that was the one thing that I tried to do when I got there.
Yeah. So at Lake Braddock, I don't remember at that time. I was officiating and I wasn't so much of a fan of what was going on. Because you guys made some regional runs at Lake Braddock as well, didn't you?
My last year, I mean, we made the regionals pretty much every year, which was nice. We had some really good teams. And then the last year before we made the Final Four, and of course got beat by Metris at Hayfield again. But that was at George Mason. I had a really good team and knew I was and that was kind of when the AD job kind of became available. Right. So that was a tough move for me because I really liked that team that I was coaching. But I had some really good teams, had some good players at Lake Braddock, had some probably probably the team that I liked the best probably was the worst team that one of the teams I liked the best. I liked them all, but we had a team that was 12 and 13 and had a kid named Chris McAvina that went to Villanova to play football, had two little guards named Mike Empey and Ryan Ferrario, had a little freshman named, maybe a sophomore, Brian McDermott, who was a good player. But we could never get over the hump. We could never get over the hump and win. We'd lose close games. And those guys would cry in the locker room and cry after. They cared so much about it. And I felt, but that was a really special group. Yeah, we had some good teams at Braddock. Never made it to the regional finals, got to the regional semis at George Mason, had a really good team my last year. That was a lot of fun, coaching there.
Did you coach Isaac Larty?
Isaac Larty. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. He's probably on that last team you were talking about.
He was super. No, he was before that. He graduated before that. And then I had RaMell Ross.
That's right.
Who
played at Georgetown, right?
Played at Georgetown. Well, I think he was, his junior year, he was legit, like Northern Region Player of the Year or second in the voting, but then hurt his shoulder and never got to play for us as a senior. Because his shoulder was just, too banged up. And then he was going to go to Fork Union, I think, for a prep year. But then Craig Escherick came in and they needed him. So he went over to Georgetown. He's become like a really, really good filmmaker.
Oh, is it right? Okay.
That's a guy you ought to try to track down because he's done some just amazing stuff in the film world, some really unique things. I got to talk to Craig about him probably about 6 months ago. I saw him in a meeting and was telling me a little bit about what RaMell was doing. But he was an unbelievable talent.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable talent.
I never saw him play. It's too bad.
Yeah, he was special. If he wouldn't have gotten injured, I think he would have had a really, really good career. He was special.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. So, well, Coach, when you think about your coaching career and you think about where basketball is today, basketball has really changed radically. When you go to games, it's positionless. It's the way the game is played is different. The parents have more of an impact. You lose more kids to private school than you used to. Kids transfer to other public schools. Right. You got social media that kids tweet highlights all the time. What do you think about where the game is today compared to when it was when you coached? And would you like to coach basketball in today's environment?
I'll say no, only because I don't know how well. I'm not on social media. I don't have Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. So I'm not sure how well I would have done with that. I feel, like you said, almost like that golden age. I feel very fortunate that when I coached, it was, there was Dick Wickline and Jim Warren and Don McCool and Red Jenkins and Charlie Thompson and Wendell Bird. And I'm not sure I couldn't, except for Brian, I'm not sure I could name all the basketball coaches right now. Doug is retired. So it's certainly a different animal. The one thing I will say is the one thing that I got out most of coaching was the relationships that I had with the players that I coached. the Darryl Franklin, the Tim Fudds. I'm texting Timmy as he's watching AZ score 32 against, that's my baby girl, just that relationship, with them. That to me was what it was all about. I still have, I think, really good relationships with all the kids that I coached. And so I hope that wouldn't be different, but it certainly is it's certainly a different animal now. I think the shot clock will be in pretty soon. I think that'll probably come. But I think it's certainly a different game. I'm not sure how well I would do with it right now. But it's hard because when you're not in the heat of it, I don't know. It's hard to go back and say, okay, at 30, what I do now with today's games. That's a tough question for me.
My guess is you're a bright guy. You knew basketball. You've been just as successful now as you were then, but it's fun to talk about. Well, last question, Coach. This has been great. I don't think we ever really talked much. I think I officiated a couple of your games, but it's been great reconnecting with you. But do you ever look back on any decisions you made about player personnel or a game, something you could have done a little bit different? When you look back on your coaching career, are there moments or personnel decisions that you look back that you wish you could have back?
Wow. I think, wow. That's a really good question. I don't think anything specifically game wise, because I don't remember. Is there anything that I did that, lost us a game or anything, and I'm sure there were coaching decisions, not having the right personnel in the game at the time or whatever. But, I don't think so. I think, I remember, Darryl will probably tell you the story. I remember, junior year, I had to cut a kid named Shavis Teal. And because he wasn't doing what we'd asked him to do. He wouldn't come to practice. He was kind of being a knucklehead. And if you ask Shavis, he'd probably tell you the same thing. Jim Smith comes in. Shavis kind of turns it around and has a great year with Darryl his senior year. But I'm not sure he would have done that if he would have, you know what I mean? If he'd have been allowed to do. So those are kind of the things that you go back on. Maybe he would have been a better player if I would have kept him. So those are kind of the things you look at, and you're not sure if you're doing the right thing. Any cut you make is hard. You get 30 or 20, 25 kids coming out and you only got 13, 14 spots, and you have to tell a kid you're not good enough. That's no fun. But in terms of game stuff, I don't think so. I think you live with what you did. You deal with it. It's easy to second guess stuff, but it's pretty happy. Like I said, I had great coaches, with me, Stan Meadows and Mike McGurk, who coached with me for a number of years. I don't know if you know Mike at all.
Of course.
What a he was great and loyal. I remember he coached when my first daughter was born. Mike coached because it was our second daughter, because I think it was in the holiday term. Yeah, it was number 2. She was born on the 28th of December. And I said, look, Mike, you need to coach. And he called me and said, hey, I got some good news and I got some bad news. And I go, okay, what's the good news? He goes, well, we won. I said, well, what's the bad news? He said, well, we were up 10 in the 4th and we won in overtime. So, so that was, so I had great coaches, Stan Meadows, Mike McNamara, Mike McGurk, Doug coached, probably one of the biggest blunders I had was not elevating Doug earlier. I probably didn't see him for the basketball mind and the coach that he was, so that was kind of a blunder on my part, but he proved me wrong, of course, and has done such a great job. But, I'm very fortunate. I was able to coach my 2 daughters, and that was awesome. I got to coach my 2 daughters in travel basketball, but the B level, like not the A team, but the B team. And what a blast that was. I was able to do that toward the end of my career when I wasn't coached. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Coach, did you ever reconnect with Shavis Teal? Did you guys make amends for that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've talked, and he used to say, the best thing I know, but it's easy for him to say that now. I'm sure at the time he wasn't thinking that. But yeah, absolutely did. Yep. Yeah.
I've had decisions like Doug when I haven't promoted somebody and I didn't see that quality. And those are things that do stick with you. But coach, you are great. You are a great coach. I loved watching you do your thing on the sidelines. It was fun. The games were great. And I really appreciate you doing this. It's been nice to hear your story and reconnect after so many years.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking. I got a little concerned when I saw the word legends. And of course I talked to my brother and he just couldn't believe it. He was like, "Oh God, please tell Julian no." It's been a lot of fun. It's good to kind of go down memory lane a little bit. And because like I said, those guys that I was able to coach, they make you a good coach. You don't come in here and just all of a sudden you're a great coach if you don't have the Russell Peytons and the Dwayne Franklins and the John Haveys, and whether it's at Lake Braddock with Isaac Lardy and Brian McDermott and the coaches that you have. Those you have good players and you're fortunate enough to be able to kind of put them in the right direction. It sure makes you look good. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Coach, thanks again for doing this. Hopefully we can keep in touch.
Absolutely. Anytime. I appreciate it very much. And thank Coach Ewell for kind of pushing me to do this too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Coach.
Happy you too. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Rest in peace.